It was 8:20 p.m. Monday, April 2, 1917. A light rain was falling in Washington as President Woodrow Wilson ducked into a waiting car and set out toward Capitol Hill, a cavalry escort clattering protectively alongside. As of that early spring evening, Europe had been at war for over 2.5 years. Millions had been killed or maimed. Now, in a few moments, Wilson intended to ask Congress to commit the United States to the European abattoir. The decision had not come easily. From the start of the Great Conflagration in Europe in the summer of 1914, the inevitable result of years of rivalries and entangling alliances, Wilson had urged the United States to remain neutral in both heart and deed. Isolationist sentiment had prevailed at first, reinforced by what one historian termed 134 years of studious disengagement from the affairs of Europe. But as the months passed and the war in Europe settled into a stalemate of mud and blood on the Western Front, neutrality became more and more problematic. Lucrative U.S. trade with the Allies, clever British propaganda, the seeming brutality of German submarine warfare, the natural ties of blood and national origin, all contrived to impel American sympathies toward the Allies. As 1917 arrived, relations with Germany deteriorated further with the German announcement that unrestricted submarine warfare, halted less than a year earlier due to U.S. protests, would be resumed. Wilson broke diplomatic relations with Germany in early February. Then came the revelation that the German foreign minister had proposed a treaty with Mexico to come into the war on the German side should the United States join the Allies. In March, 3 U.S. ships were torpedoed as German submarines once again began to take their toll. Anti-German fever swept the country. And now Wilson, a one-time college professor who only 5 months before had narrowly won re-election on promises of peace, was about to ask for war. He arrived to find many of the congressmen wearing or carrying small American flags. The world must be made safe for democracy, he told them. He asked the nation to accept the status of belligerent which has been thrust upon it. To exert all its power and employ all its resources to bring the government of the German Empire to terms and end the war. And finally, to such a task we can dedicate our lives and our fortunes, everything that we are and everything we have, with the pride of those who know that the day has come when America is privileged to spend her blood and her might for the principles that gave her birth and happiness and the peace which she has treasured. God helping her, she can do no other. Congress gave him a standing ovation. Think of what it was they were applauding, Wilson remarked to his secretary as they rode back to the White House. My message today was a message of death for our young men. How strange it seems to applaud that. 4 days later, Congress formally approved a declaration of war. The evening of April 2 I had accepted an invitation to dine and go to the opera in New York City. Our party occupied a box on the right-hand side of the stage, about halfway to the front. The opera was Canterbury Pilgrims, by Doughboy, with a German cast. During the entr'acte many of the men in the audience rushed out to 7th Avenue to buy newspapers. There was an extra, reporting that the president had asked Congress for a declaration of war. This newspaper, the New York Evening Telegram, was then printed in pink. It was the most unusual sight, looking down from our box, to see every 4th or 5th person sitting in the orchestra, dressed to kill, for in those days no one would have thought of going to the opera without the man wearing a dress suit and the woman in a low-necked gown, reading a pink newspaper. At the end of the next act, the leading soprano, Margaret Ober, a German, fainted dead away. After the opera was over the curtain went up again. The audience all stood, the entire cast appeared, and led by them the audience joined in singing the Star-Spangled Banner. It was impressive and moving. Congress did not delay in declaring war. From then on it was only a question of time as to how and where and when those of my age would serve. We knew nothing of the mutinies in the French army, the result of the bloody failure of the French commander-in-chief Neville's offensive. We were full of hope and enthusiasm. I happened to be in Boston that day, war was declared, and while walking up Washington Street saw a terrific mob of people in front of the Boston Globe office, reading the bulletins. In the crowd in front of the Globe office, many people were expressing their thoughts, and from the consensus I heard, they were 100% behind our president. It was said that the sinking of the Lusitania was the last straw that led us into war, also that the French had their backs right up against the wall and needed our help. Remembering our history and how General Lafayette came to our assistance during those dark days of our first fight for independence, perhaps we had an obligation to our sister republic, the Republic of France. Papers were selling like hotcakes. On my way home I bought an Evening Globe, and as I sat in the surface car I started reading the paper and I observed that everybody else was doing the same. When the U.S. entered the World War I, knew I would be called from reserve. But without waiting I re-enlisted. In fact, I joined up that same day, April 6, 1917. All of the men at the ranch wanted to go along with me. Half of them barely knew where the war was and didn't give a damn. We caught the train to Waco, and soon as we got there all of us, 32 strong, trotted right up to the recruiting office and took the oath. That was sure one happy crowd. I quit my job at the steel mill and went to see Mr. George Haney, chief electrician, and Mr. Elliot Lewis, assistant chief electrician, and told them I was enlisting in the Navy. They wished me good luck and assured me my job would be waiting for me when I got back, and I thanked them. Shook hands with the boys. I was the first from the line gang to enlist. Next morning I went to Cleveland and stayed for 3 days to get away from home until Mother stopped her crying. I went and registered to be drafted. Some of my friends were there and I asked them to come with me and join the Navy, but none wanted to, so I went alone. The first man I met was a U.S. Marine. He sure looked fine, too. He showed me the Marines' posters, first to fight on land or sea, and I was so impressed that I signed. He was a fast worker all right. I got back home and told Mother and Dad that I had enlisted and nobody was going to stop me. It was like a funeral around home. On the 14th of April I made my decision to enter the Marine Corps, at which time I'd learned that I couldn't be an aviator because of faulty eyesight. There wasn't any main recruiting station in Minneapolis, so knowing that I probably couldn't even pass the eye examination for the Marine Corps, I went up to the substation and memorized the eye chart, which was in plain view in those days with a big capital A, and a T and F getting smaller as it went down the column. I then went over to St. Paul, and the recruiting office was on the 4th floor of an office building, and one had to get his name in the book in order to get an appointment for a physical examination. That line, to get your name in the book, extended up the office, down the hall and down 4 flights of steps, down on the sidewalk and around the corner, just to give you an idea of the enthusiasm. Now, this was on the 14th of April, 8 days after the war. This will just give you an idea of the enthusiasm which the youth of that city, at least, and I know from all other cities, responded to the call of arms. It was something that I'm afraid is a thing of the past now. I was 17, unmarried, of course, and had no responsibilities to hold me back. I felt that I looked old enough to pass a recruiting sergeant and that the call for men was urgent enough to justify me in camouflaging my age by 1 year. Anyhow, I thought, I can go to France and grow up with the war. In the midst of the intense recruiting campaign for the National Guard, I was at the theater one night when a call was made for volunteers. During the speech of the recruiting agent, I made up my mind. He wound up by asking all the men willing to serve the country, to see her through her present emergency with rifles in hand, to step upon the stage. As I sat very near to the stage, I was the first to present myself. When I filled out my application, I chose the old New York 69th, because it and I were Irish. Next morning we recruits of the night before went to the armory. There we were taken in charge. Passed through our physical examinations, and 5 of us were sent to Company K, Captain J.P. Hurley's company. All 5 of us were young, all about my age, and, when the captain had been called out to look us over by the first sergeant, his eyes traveled up and down our line, and he exclaimed, "What are we getting now, Sergeant? A Boy Scout outfit?"